Alrighty, so we are broadcasting and I believe we are live. Welcome, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. I am Positive Jessica with Hack Mankind, and today I have a very special guest. Not only is she an incredible human being, but also a dear friend, and I would like to welcome Shannon O'Donnell, who's a vibe architect. She's chief storyteller, as well as the founder of the Restless Group. And guys, she is really restless. Although I know you're trying to shift that. We'll talk about it a little later. But she has created this creative agency. She's known for throwing incredible exclusive experiences in the entertainment and wild concepts at world-leading festivals. Shannon lives to connect people and break preconceptions through creating shared moments in time. I am so excited to have her here because, even as I said, a dear friend, I can come to her. She has all these incredible ideas, guys, and I don't know, she is a creative genius, and I'm so thankful that you're here today. Thank you so much for joining us, Shannon. Hi, Shannon.
Hey, how are you? Very many uses of the word very. It's a high expectation to live up to. Oh my. Yeah. Thanks for having me, Jess.
I'm so excited to have you here. And one of the things we're going to be talking about, for those tuning in, we're going to be talking about our story, right? And how to tell our story, and storytelling, and how it's important. And that actually totally connects with our theme of the week, which is words and language and how important that is. And did you see how Shannon just picked up on it? I said very, I don't know how many times. I was just being authentic. And there she picked it up, and she's incredible at that. So yeah, what are your thoughts on the power of words, Shannon?
Wow. I think they affect us more subconsciously than we think. But I don't think they're of utmost importance in I guess, to be formal. You know, I think that a lot of people, when they're starting a brand and a company, they spend so much time and they want it to sound so professional. And I like things to sound natural. You know, you could write copy and still say very, and it would be okay. So I think I'm more playful, you know, I make up words, as you know. I say words that people don't understand sometimes. So yeah, I don't know. But words are part of storytelling, you know, and how do you make more impact? I like to say less, not in life, but in my writing. I think less is more. So use fewer words, use words wisely.
That's powerful. And less is more. One of the things I've always learned is that sometimes if you talk less, you listen more, and you'll get a lot more. And talking about more, so one of the promises we've made to our listeners is only the best story wins. Learn how to build and spread it. So here are the three things you're touching on right now. So the best story, my thought is like, okay, how do I know how to put down the best story? And then, yeah, so how do I build that story? And then how do I share it? So it kind of just touches on which story do I tell, how do I build it, and how do I spread it? So can we go into a little bit more detail on that?
Wow, that's how long is this podcast?
Only an hour. So just high
Okay.
level. Because I know for those tuning in, Shannon actually has an incredible PR program that she's designing and she's putting in right now. And if you connect with Shannon through her Facebook, we'll put that in the comments. Not her Facebook, your Instagram. We'll be able to direct message, and she'll give you a free the PR 101 during COVID. And she has very creative ways to do that. So yeah, can we actually, before we go into these details, Shannon, you know, it's I find your story so inspiring. When you think about, you know, how you started, you think PR, it's like this, you know, there's ways there, we talked about it, you know, as we're friends, and we've talked about it before, and you say like there's rules and things, but I didn't know there were these rules. So I made my own rules, and you became extra successful in no time compared to a lot of others because of that. Can you tell us a little bit about that story before we go into the how to make your own story? Like, tell us your story.
My story. Well, first off, I'm doing this, but Jess could attest to me being the wizard behind the curtain, and I I like my privacy. So I'm doing it for Hack Mankind, but I like to be the person behind the scenes. So I've always been, it was funny because I was speaking to my father earlier today, and he mentioned that I was a connoisseur of lemonade stands growing up. And I was also throwing parties, I think since like 5th grade, like discos, he called it, on the playground. I'd rent venues. He reminded me that I'd actually rent venues. I'd convince him to allow me to rent a venue for like junior high parties, and I wouldn't let my parents leave like the little side room. So I think it always came naturally to me, but on a very smaller scale. I moved to New York City after college, and I really hadn't worked in a professional environment. I worked at a fashion studio called Milk, and Milk at the time definitely didn't have the HR department, or it wasn't as big as it is today. It's grown into being one of the best studios in the world and an agency of its own. But we were kind of the renegade kids, and I started in music. As a music supervisor, which actually is a different form of storytelling, right? And that's how I continue to see stories, through sound, right? Stories are multidimensional. So what is it that makes you feel something? And that's really what we're getting to. But I started in music and helping directors and filmmakers tell stories by putting music in the background of film. And then I built tight artist relationships, because how do artists make money, right? When they aren't selling out albums anymore. So music licensing became really important to that, and so did events. So I had my feet in both. I was throwing parties, actually back in Toronto and Paris, and then eventually in New York City, and I was placing music in film. So I had deep artist relationships, and I realized, and I still realize, that so many of these amazing artists that I worked with, they didn't have PR and they had no promotion. So what happens, right, when you're incredibly talented and no one knows it? So I organically started PR, but I also knew that a lot of the talent that I loved, they didn't have $5,000 a month to pay for a PR retainer. So I said, okay, well, let's get creative. You know who has money? Converse shoes has money, or all these brands have money. So I started going to brands unknowingly, not knowing how hard it was, or not knowing that nobody asked these questions. And I asked them to support us, to support the talent from the ground up, which led to some very ambitious projects the first 2 years of my company, at major festivals with celebrities faster than I could ever imagined. And we built an agency on the back end of that. So my story is basically believing in talent, always wanting to create platforms for talent that I believe in to be seen, and to get really creative on how we do that. Obviously, experiential has changed quite a bit. You know, did I think that we weren't going to be doing events for the next year? Never. But now we're getting creative again. How do we tell stories digitally? And that's going to be the new era. And then also from the PR, once again, how do we democratize PR? Because there's going to be a lot of people right now that are looking for new beginnings. So how do we tell their individual stories? So that's really my story, is creatively helping other people to tell their story. But I could tell you stories too, but I don't think they want to be on the internet. So yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And one of the things that makes me want to ask you is, you did grow, and you talk about creativity. So that definitely is one of your life hacks, is really being creative and having, thinking outside the box. If you'd have to say, two or three more things that really took you from not having a company to having a super successful company in PR in a way that, in a completely different way, what would those 2-3 other things, hacks, would you share?
Well, it's crazy. Like, there's some announcements coming, and we're going to be growing even more exponentially in the next couple of months, which is intimidating and amazing. But I have to say that I started this because I wanted to make impact. I didn't look at it through the lens of a traditional business where it was dollars and cents. And I think that people saw that, right? And I've said it before, and I'll say it again. I don't think you can buy culture. I think that you could be a patron of culture if you're a brand. And I think you can support culture, but you can't buy culture. So we really had our ears to the street from the beginning, and then we had our feet moving forward, really trying to see what's next, really listening and observing culture and then forming culture. So that is really what I recommend. I'm like, so many people come to me and they try to emulate something else. And I say, be radically different. You know, pretend that the box isn't there and then confine the box. Does that make sense? So it's really, these are some broad questions because it's so hard to just give, you know, these broad concepts. So I'm trying to find commonalities. How I'd advise you to create your brand is so different than how I'd advise a shoe company or, you know, an entertainment company. So it's really hard, but ultimately do it for impact. Do it, make it mission driven. If it's going to be grassroots, it's going to be mission driven. Like if you're going to make a toaster and you absolutely have the best toaster and it's cheaper, that's a very different way to market, right? But if you're building a brand that means something, and that's what I do, it has to be fundamentally authentic, and you have to start with impact in mind. And I mean, a lot of people use the word authentic now, and it's like cultivating authenticity, which is BS, but live it, like practice what you preach, because people are going to know.
Oh my goodness, that just mic drop moment, 100% mic drop moment, because it relates 100% with what we do here at Hack Mankind. We were talking about on our business panel exactly that, like how do you thrive in business? And it's integrity. And we even have Sean, our Friday panelist that was on today, with his whole thing is integrity-based human influence. And you know, we were actually all together last week. It feels like forever.
One tip. Okay, I have a tip that will be actually effective for anyone. So
let's do it.
When I haven't really, you know, you say I'm restless. Now I'm calling my company Rest moving forward. I'm becoming a Buddhist monk. But when I really think of like what really made our agency tip to the point where we could throw events for 5,000 people and not spend $1 in marketing, really word of mouth events. Like I think 1,000 people show up and 5,000 people would show up to these experiences. And it really was the 20 by 20 rule. So I'm going to give you a story about Tito's Vodka. Okay. Tito's Vodka is a vodka company. It's now the best selling vodka in America. And Tito's started this company on nothing. Okay. So much so that he like printed his own label on his like Windows 98. Okay. And stuck it to the bottle. And what Tito's asked was, he approached 20 friends and he said, this is the best vodka you'll ever have. I'm sure you'll love it. And if you do love it, can you tell 20 of your friends? That simple. That's grassroots marketing, right? That is real spirit and soul behind it, the passion behind the brand. And to this day, by the way, Tito's hasn't adjusted his label. It still is that brown, looks like it's been printed off a computer label. And it stick to the, that's what stuck within the brand, right? And so it doesn't necessarily have to be the fanciest or the most glam. And I work with luxury brands. And sometimes I do juxtaposition. Like I've done an event with McDonald's and Moet, right? Because it's ultimately, you should have came to that party, Jess, that was great. But ultimately, right, it's about getting people to see the world differently and think differently and out of the box again. And I think anyone can be interesting. I traditionally work in more the lifestyle space and the countercultural space, but look at 1-800-GOT-JUNK. It's garbage. It's literal garbage. And they created an interesting story that's memorable. So yeah, I don't know. I think I went on a tangent there. Too much.
No, it's perfect. I love the story that you just shared about Tito's, and even the Moet and McDonald's and all these are so inspiring. And one of the things that keeps coming out is thinking out the box, thinking outside the box. What is your recommendation for people to think outside the box? I feel when you're so inside the box, it's hard to get out of it. So yeah. What are your tips and tricks to get out the box? And for those tuning in, I'm seeing questions about how to tell your story. We will get to the juice of that. And one of the things that I value and appreciate about you, Shannon, is that you can have as much tips and hacks, but if you don't understand the soul of it, if you don't understand like what it actually means, you're not going to get it. So that's why I'm kind of diving deep into this, because I think that the fact of having creativity and thinking outside the box really differentiates you. So
Yeah,
what are your tips?
I think there's two things there. One, that's the big issue. And that's what this PR program that I'm developing is really going to get to, because ultimately I can give you every tip and trick to talk to press, which I will in the program. And I think it's very important to democratize this, to make sure that people have access to tell their stories, especially now during COVID, right? Really important. But that's BS if you have no story, right? It's the same thing. If you have a product, you could tell everyone about your product. But if it's a bad product, you're not going to have return customers. So just because you have access and you know the tips and tricks does not mean that you're going to actually move the dial. So start with the story, one, and then people are going to find you, two. But then if you do it right, you start with the story and you have my tips and tricks, then we're rolling, then we're rocking and rolling. And you could do it on no money. I think if we go back to what you originally said, part of the cool thing about my company is I literally started it with no money. And I sometimes forget this because it's like, well, it's almost like PTSD. Like some of the risks I took, I go, oh, I can't believe I did that. But I mean, I did events for celebrities on like $1,500 at South by Southwest. And these are like hip hop, okay? Like hip hop budgets, like insane. So that's one tangent. Second tangent is you say, okay, how do you think outside the box when you're so in the box? The questions, I can't answer that because I'm outside of the box. I need to know how to be in the box. But why are you in the box? That's an evaluation. What's keeping you in the box? You're scared. You wonder what people will think of you. You know, you think it has to be a certain way. I mean, with the PR program I'm developing, I actually think a lot of people that are in sales would actually be better than the traditional person that comes straight from school and they're in that box. They go, PR has to be this way. I don't care. You went to Harvard? I don't care. You went to Yale? I don't care. If you're good at sales, you went to Yale, I don't judge you, but these aren't precursors to being successful. So I think the evaluation has to be, why am I in the box? Let's shatter the box and then build a new box. I think boxes are important ultimately because we need some structure, right? We need a container to go deeply creative, but just don't be in someone else's box, maybe? Yeah, build your own box.
And one of the questions we have coming in from one of our attendees is, how do I know I'm in the box?
That's a good question, right? Well, there's other things you could do, like ask your community. Like, I don't know. That's the thing. I think branding is kind of a knack. I think you can learn it. I think there are great programs for learning it and you can excel, but it's always good to get a second opinion. And really, how are people talking? What is your community actually saying? And really navigating that and looking at that and observing that. Because people also forget in social media, and I'm not going to pretend that social media is my forte. I work with excellent people in social media for our clients, but social media is social. So many people are pushing out, hey, what's up? I'm the best. But ultimately, what is your audience actually saying about you? Do you change the way they see the world? Are they dumbfounded when they go to your experiences if they're live and they go, what the F, didn't swear, what the F just happened?
Thank you.
That is really an indicator. Or if there's no discussion, I think it's a real determinant that you're inside the box. Because don't be afraid to be controversial. Don't be afraid to speak what's on your mind and to really stand up and stand for what your brand stands for. So I don't know. So certain things you could be in the box for. Again, I'll go back to the toaster. Toasters literally come in a box. But I can tell you, I can make a toaster interesting. Look at Smeg. Smeg is a toaster company. It has a following and it means something. It has a story. So again, it's not even about a toaster. Anything could be outside the box.
I think that's one of the good points that you brought forward is ask your friends. Like one of the things, like I'm lucky I have access to you. I literally call. We have a mastermind call every Tuesday in the mornings, and we share what's going on, any challenges, if we have any questions. We're all doing new projects, and we share that, and we have our friends and people, and not don't just go and contact like any friend, right? Know who you're talking to and who you're taking this to, right? Your mom is always probably going to say, oh my goodness, it's so pretty, but like go and see like a successful, somebody that you admire, that you respect, that is doing better than you in certain areas. In that area, for example, 100% Shannon is excelling. That's her expertise. So I go to her and I ask her. And that's what's really cool about this program you're putting forward. And so
Peter's asking to jump in, which will be interesting. But also,
yes.
I want to say that maybe not ask your friends. Like, we have phones, man. We have the internet. DM someone, be like, yo, really, what do you think of this? Like, ask people you don't know. I do Survey Monkey. Give somebody $5 to take your survey and then make it anonymous. I think that the problem is, I think you could attest that I'm not your typical friend. Like, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I'm probably going to make it worse than it is, not better than it is, and go backwards, right? The problem when we go with friends is they often, are either in the same box. They see the world in the same way as you. I think our friend group is a bit different, right? Our friend group is from, guys, we have friends from like 18 to 85. Within our friend group, right? I don't think the average person has that much diversity in their friend group, and they see the world usually in the same way. So, yeah. And by the way, like there could be a container right there. Like, I see the world in this way. This is what's important to me, but do stuff with an element of surprise within that world. Yeah. Does that make sense?
100%. So before Peter, you jump in, I just want to set a little container. For those who've been following us for a while, Peter likes to jump in and take over. And I love you, Peter. Just a few minutes, because we still have not gotten to the meat of the call today, which is how to tell your story. And I've got about 5 questions on that topic. And I know a lot of our audience are wanting to hear that. But anyways, welcome to our founder, Peter Swain.
Mr.
Hey, Swain. I feel like I should have entrance music. Number one.
I know you should.
I should, you're right.
What would be the song if you had any licensing budget in the whole world, Peter?
Actually, my first sales job, my sales manager insisted we all got a song that we had to play when we made a big sale. So it's already been decided for me, I'm afraid.
What is it? Oh, God.
All of them were always embarrassing.
Oh, wow. I mean, that's a song that gets on in your head for a way.
It's better than the bell, right? But listen, I'm going to say 3 things, then I'm going to step back out. Number 1, if you use acronyms, you're in the box. Number 2, if you need to ask the question, you're in the box, right? There hasn't been a woman that goes, I think I might be pregnant. I think I might be in labor. You're not in labor, right? From speaking from the perspective of a guy that's been through 2 childbirths, if you say the sentence, I think I might be in labor, you're not, right? When you're screaming and wishing you could rip your own head off, that's when you're in labor. So if anyone's saying, am I in the box? Yes, you are. But the reason I wanted to jump in, right, is there's been this iterating thing when I've been speaking to Sean, speaking to Shannon, of we have to live our truth. We have to live in integrity, and we have to live in authenticity. And here is authentic truth for you. 1/4 of the US population is currently unemployed. 1/4 of the working population of the US is unemployed. The reproductive rate of the virus today has gone up to 0.9. 1 means we close the schools down. So we're going to go back and open the schools on the 1st of June. Actually, it looks like we might not. And the UK debt is currently forecast to be larger than that of the Second World War. And every first world country, as of yesterday, is in a recession. So I'm challenging you two to go deeper in this conversation, because Shannon we need to get to some truths here.
Well, that's a great question, man.
How do people, is PR even relevant when people are trying to work out whether they put food on their plate?
More relevant than ever.
Why?
Well, one, I'll be the first to say it. Just because you're in GQ doesn't mean it's going to move the dial, okay? That's social proof. That's going to help your Google rating. It's going to make you look cooler to your friends. Is that ultimately the most important thing? No. Will it change the way your sales trajectory goes? No. But that is not necessarily only PR. PR ultimately is telling your story, getting people to hear and see your story, because that's really the only hope. Now, I'm working on a project right now, as I mentioned, to democratize PR, to make it accessible to anyone. And I want the best story to win. Traditionally, you know, you think of PR as somebody with a big roster, a big Rolodex of powerful people that they could connect to.
And a fancy Bluetooth headset.
I don't own one of those, but.
Yeah, but if you ask me, like, who is that PR person? I have a clipboard and a fancy Bluetooth headset.
God, I know there's such a stigma around PR people, and it's like, I don't want to use the word the D word, but yeah, like that idea of PR is what I want to break, right? I want to really disrupt an industry because it's ultimately the most powerful industry in the world. Look at the media that we're watching right now. It's dictated by PR. The stories that are told ultimately stem from PR, those relationships with journalists. So having relationships with journalists is a lot of power. Being able to be part of that cultural narrative and shape it is very important. So PR is important. It's more important than ever, but how do we get the stories in the right hands? That's PR. So I want to spread the best stories, the stories that create positive change and impact. I want to empower people to do that. But yeah, PR is important. I think you should invest in PR now more than ever. That might just be your time, right? That might not be a financial commitment to PR, but it's your time. And if you don't, it's a sink or swim time, right? If your story's not there, if your brand's not developed and you have no attention, people are going to forget you right now. Your doors are physically closed. And also, how do we create a sense of normalcy moving forward, right? I have a lot of restaurant clients and entertainment clients. They don't know what to do. What do you do when you pay $50,000 in rent and you can't open your doors? And then when your doors reopen, people are scared to eat and dine and, you know, go out. So how people deal with it right now and within the next 2 months is really going to dictate how their company will survive.
Wow. So that leads me to the questions of the day. How do I build my brand, telling my story without a huge financial needs right now?
I mean, I like the 2020. I think Sean calls it the 10 by 10s. Start there.
What is that?
Yeah, depending where your friend group. So the 10 by 10s in the 2020 is Sean Callaghy meets Tito. How did they both start their business? Sean says, get 10 friends to tell 10 friends. Tito said, get 20 friends to tell 20 friends. Start there. I mean, maybe we could role play and you could give me a brand, like we could get more specific and I could give a case example so we could go a bit deeper. Maybe, does that help?
All right. So if somebody wants to share a brand either on Facebook or we can just go, well, yeah, Peter, you're jumping in.
Yeah, I was going to say there's another interesting one. You know, Innocent Smoothies? They launched at a festival in the UK and they had a bin, 2 bins. They gave the drink out for free and 2 bins said, I love it, please carry on. You suck, don't do this again. And they literally put a poster up saying, if that bin's bigger than this bin, we're in business. If that bin is bigger than this bin, you're not going to hear from us again. I just think that all these things, Jess, is what I think we're saying is for small businesses is challenge creativity and time. It's not just about cash. It's about getting attention and mind share. And you and I have spoken about this in various calls we've had. And I still stand by it. One meaningful conversation is worth more than 1 million likes. One meaningful conversation. You want to go and relaunch that restaurant? Print some damn flyers and talk to your neighborhood. Right? They're out there, and we didn't used to have to do that. So we've all got so lazy because business was so simple. You just had to literally open your pocketbook and people would put money in it for you. That's what happened 3 months ago, 6 months ago. It's not the way anymore.
That didn't happen to me 6 months ago, so we should have been hanging out more.
Trying to get you to stay in the same place, Shannon, for more than about 5 seconds is a challenge.
How long has it? It's been 30
I'm
minutes.
amazed. I'm sorry. I'm going. Shut up.
Bye. Okay.
Oh my goodness.
How about I create the container? Okay. I'm going to talk to you about an apparel company. I'm sure a lot of your audience, they have physical goods or they have services that they want to sell. I could give an example in both. Okay. So
Yes.
FUBU. FUBU is a company, and how it got its start was on nothing. Okay. It became, I don't know, Google it, at least 100 million. I'll say billion, but it's probably not true. But so FUBU got started because the founder created it by itself. He started selling FUBU out of his car in parking lots. That didn't work. But then he said, okay, who is in my community and who do I have access to? So he just started going to people and saying, can you wear FUBU? Just giving them FUBU, FUBU, FUBU. He couldn't get it on celebrities at the beginning. So what did he do? He gave it to bouncers. Because also FUBU made larger sizes because it was like a baggier fit. It was like, you know, that 90s era, really baggy hip hop clothes. So he would give it to bouncers, and the bouncers at the best clubs in New York City. And they had access to celebrities, and everybody was trying to get into these clubs. And eventually people said, what is this? What's this FUBU? And then some celebrities said, oh, can I get some FUBU? And then they started product stating the FUBU, to the point where, Google the year, because this is off the cuff, but LL Cool J in a Gap commercial wore a FUBU hat. It's fallen to the box, is a Gap commercial. LL Cool J wore a FUBU hat in a Gap commercial. Gap probably gave LL $1 million, and he repped FUBU. You'd be surprised. I've worked with celebrities, and I said during Sundance, I go, can you wear this for a client? And they say, cool, especially if there's a cause. So it's like, how do you leverage the power of asking? And if you have a story behind it, people want to help people. I'm about to launch a campaign in New York. I really want to, we've talked about this. It's a scary time for New Yorkers because we're not in New York. And I love New York more than anyone. And how do we create a New York strong campaign? And I really want to say that we might not be here, but we're here. And I'm starting a campaign, and I have a couple celebrities I'm working with on it. But the ask wasn't that big because the story and the resonance and the meaning behind it are important. So really, like, if you have a good story, you'd be surprised on how many people want to be involved in that story. Charitable components also help. So yeah, FUBU model, do what FUBU did. Research that. There's lots on the internet. It was Damon. It was Damon from Shark Tank, actually, that started FUBU.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so so you said that's an incredible and what sounds story. One of the things that sounds like they were doing is like they tried one thing, it didn't work. They tried another thing, it didn't work. You just keep going and keep being creative and keep going. So that's an example for actual tangible product. What about services? Like somebody like a chiropractor or something like that.
Okay, well, when I look at what Damon did with FUBU, it was ultimately about cultivating community, right? Yes, he was very persistent and he persevered, but he was strategic. He said he didn't even have budgets, by the way. So he was like, I literally cannot afford to pay anyone to wear my product, which served him because then he created organic relationship. And he basically didn't have a lot of product to give out. It's not like he could have did the model of the drink company at a big festival that Peter just spoke about. So he had to be really strategic on who got his items. So that's another thing. But as far as, say you're a chiropractor, and again, this is not my specialty, working with chiropractors, but again, I like to think that I'm going to use the example of a dentist, if you don't mind, because I could give you an example.
Yeah, sure.
There's a new brand that has stuck out to me. It's called TEND, Tend. And it's in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. I'm sure they have other locations, but when you look at it, you almost think it's like Goop. You think, what is this? It's a brand that looks like a luxury brand, but it's a dental office. So it shows that design is important in whatever you do. Another thing. But I think ultimately, if you're a chiropractor or you're a dentist, one, how do you tap into culture? Like, can you make it funny? Like, can we not make this boring? Like, just because you're a dentist doesn't mean you have to be boring. So what are memes that you could get involved in? Like, how can you create the spirit of your brand identity to make people feel something, right? Whether that's, you know, volunteering in third world countries and really helping people and making impact in dentistry, or, you know, making people laugh, or making it look sexy as F word again, didn't say it. So people are like, okay, this is different. This isn't my typical dental experience. I'm sure I could give Vogue a call based on that, right? So there's a lot of different avenues, but just be different. Or supply the best service ever and then get people you love to do the 10 by 10 rule.
And tell the story. So let's dive deep into the story. What's the structure of telling a great story?
Well, you could tell stories in different ways. Okay. So if you're thinking from like a written perspective, you know, there's a hero's journey, but you could tell a story through music, through a party. Just because you're a chiropractor or a dentist doesn't mean you can't throw a party, just so you know. Yeah.
So yeah, those are different ideas, is like how to tell a story. One of the things that you mentioned is, so being in integrity authentic, telling you why you're doing this, one of like the causes, and sharing your own like personal journey or hero's journey. Can you go like, what's a hero's journey? I mean, we know this language, but what's a hero's journey for you?
Again, I'm not the specialist in this. The hero's journey is basically you have the protagonist and the antagonist, and you're rooting for the hero, right? So if I look at the brand as a hero, as Sean would say, what is their unique heroic identity? So let's look at the brand as a person, as a living being, as a breathing spirit, and what is special about it? What's heroic about the brand? Start there. What are their quirks? What's your brand quirk? Right? Look at Smeg. We talked about toasters, and I said toasters aren't interesting. And then I said, oh wait, I found an example of a toaster that's actually interesting, right? What is it about Smeg? It's the design. Who are they partnering with? So for example, if you're a chiropractor, I'm having trouble with chiropractic because I just don't go to a chiropractor. But I'm going to say
that's okay. I was just an example.
I'm
so
going to
like
say
service
physical, but I want to get as niche as possible. So
yeah,
I really don't know much about chiropractic. I probably need to get cracked. I'm like, but a physical therapist. Okay, here's an example. If a physical therapist said, "I need PR. What am I going to do?" I'd go, well, why don't we, here's an example, partner with a shoe company and talk about arches in your feet, right? This shoe is great because it has arch support. And then you could go deep into that. You could now have a fashion tie-in that gives you some cultural clout. You could engage in stories that way. So a lot of partnerships, right? Like look at people in your world that don't directly compete with you, but they're on the periphery of it, right? So if you run a gym, partner with a physical therapist, partner with a running shoe company, partner with a beverage company that's within the gym, you know, partner with a band even, find a way to partner with a band.
100%. And I think for it to be successful, what you say, it's something that makes sense to you. So one of the things, so for example, I'm in the self-help space, right? We're doing Hack Mankind and I have Positive Jessica. One of the people that influenced me a lot and I admire is Marie Forleo. And Marie has a background in music, and she used to be a dancer. Even I think she worked for Nike, or she did some stuff with Nike.
Hip hop videos back.
Yeah, she did hip hop, and she did like classes.
Yeah, I'm friends with her stylist, and she's into that.
Yeah, I remember you mentioned that. And one of the cool things she always says, like, integrate whatever it is that's unique to you into what you're doing. So I went to her seminar. And oh my goodness, guys, it was like a show. It was incredible. You had dancers. It was like a music show, but it was, and at the same time, it was her book launch. Everything is figure outable. And it's basically personal development, self-help it was a self-help book that turned into a music show and a dance off. It was pretty cool. And definitely it's something that rings true to her, right? If she didn't know anything about music, if you don't know nothing about music, don't go partnering up with music. That's my opinion. What do you think?
Well, I guess people who work with me and for me would say I probably have a bit of OCD, right? I could go dream, but then I pay mass attention to detail. And obviously if music isn't your forte, get somebody who pays attention to that and let them help you. But when a lot of the brands I work with, I conceptualize from the beginning, or I go in and I do a complete unraveling of their brand. And say it's a brick and mortar space, like music is important. Like if I was building a brand, and it was a dental office or a chiropractic office, I would pay attention to every detail from the second I walked into that space. Have you ever been at a restaurant and the music is so annoying in the background?
Yeah, too loud, too like club vibey or whatever it is. Yeah.
It's these details that people don't pay attention to that make the difference. Like 11 Madison Park is 11 Madison Park. Hopefully still is 11 Madison Park after this, because they created magic in every element. So don't forget, like, you know, you could have amazing content. I know you have amazing content, Jess, and you've done a lot of work on your design and you build a brand around it, because everything has to make me feel something from the second I get in to get out, you know, in that storytelling moment. So yeah, you could have a great story and it's all about being young and wild and fresh. And then I go to your website, it's like 2 shades of beige and brown and a picture of like a computer and a guy going like this, you know, like, does that make sense? So continuity and
feeling. I think like, what's the journey that you're taking your customers or your prospects through, and how do they feel throughout the story? The story is not only the story you're telling, it's everything, every touch point about you. Oh my goodness, I got a lot of work.
Yeah, so I know I'm giving like broad examples, but yeah, so
no, it's super helpful. I think it's a great reminder. So yeah, continuity and yeah, sharing your story, and I think sharing it as often as possible. One of the things that you mentioned as well, so how do you get the story out? So once you have your story, you already know what you're telling, you know what you're partnering up with and who you're partnering up with, and you know your why, you know what you're standing for, your mission, your vision, etc. Then how do you make sure that it gets out there and people listen?
Yeah, this is a different question too. A lot of that depends on budget. We work with really massive budgets now and like still micro budgets when we want to do charity projects like the one I'm about to launch in New York in a couple of weeks. And again, I'm going to send you the link. It's really in beta now. I'm working it out. I'm actually here by the ocean writing it now, which will really explain a lot of the language. And then the next step in a boot camp style on then, okay, like now that you even know the container, like let's get deep into the story. Let's get that press release, right? Like Jeff Bezos, by the way, says that write a press release even before you develop the brand. It's almost to really understand the vision. Okay.
So is that how you get your story out? You write a press release? And what's a press release for those who don't know?
Let's go back to that. What was the initial question you asked before?
How do I get my story out?
Okay, so yeah. How do you get the story out? I mean, that really, again, depends on your budget and a lot of those things. I mean, you could get your story out on a small budget or you could get your story out on a big budget. I'm going to break it down into 3 things, okay? Because a lot of people don't even know this. And this is the kind of example of what this program will help with. So there's 3 types of media. There's earned media, which is actually PR, right? That's free advertising, okay? So if you're in Vogue, you're mentioned in Vogue. I mean, there are conflicts, by the way, with some of these editorials now, because people actually pay to be podcast guests sometimes. I could drop a couple names and you'd be very surprised that these popular podcasts are charging people to be on. So, I mean, the industry is on its head right now. It's like, it's a weird time, but let's pretend that doesn't exist, okay? So usually if you could get in Vogue and you don't pay to be in Vogue, or you could get on a podcast and you don't pay to be on a podcast, that's called earned media. You earned it, Then there's owned media. So owned media is your website, your Instagram, your Facebook, okay? And then there's paid media, and that's all the paid advertising you do. So what do I advise people? Let's focus on the first two. Let's focus on owned media, right? So like we talked about, making it tell your story, making it very impactful, making it beautiful. And then let's work on earned media and try to get free advertising from that. Now, is there going to be a happy relationship between earned media and paid media? Usually, definitely at this time. And by the way, from my billing last month, I think paid media is down right now. It might have gone up and jumped, but I know it was a lot cheaper last month than previously. So it might be a good time to do some paid media. But again, I highly, highly, highly advise you not to do paid media without that story in place.
Highly, 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 highly. That's a lot of highs.
Yeah, that's 4 or 5. Just don't do it. Yeah.
So I love how you broke it down for us. It makes it so it makes it clear where you're looking at, so being on other people's platforms, really, and leveraging that, and then having your own platform that you can share. So
exactly.
Those two is where we want to be focusing.
Yeah, and you could then do paid media. Say you were on a very popular podcast or you got into Vogue, then we could maybe talk about some paid media to tell people that you were on that. Make sense?
Makes a lot of sense. And so yes, and then the next thing, so if you're talking about paid media or even the earned media, right? To get a press release, is that how we can also get
okay.
Like what's a press release? Like,
this is controversial. Okay, so traditionally when we go back to like 90s PR, for me 90s like seems like the era of like Don Draper, where he's like, you know, having whiskey at the desk. The good old days of PR. You could oh, you froze for a sec. So I'm just gonna go back. So in like the good old days, those nostalgic good old days before I was in the world of PR, it seemed so fun back then. Before the Instagram and the Facebook and the social media, people focused on the press release because a lot less people had access to journalists, right? So what would happen is publicists would put information and news about their clients and their companies on what was called the wire. And the wire still exists, PR Newswire, Getty, there's many other wires where you could put your company info on the wire. The thing is, there's so many people doing that now that you're in a red ocean. Okay, it's just like, how do you break through the noise? The expectation that a journalist is going to see it on the wire and then write about it, like it's nilch to me. Like, I think it's a waste of time and money and effort. A lot of people do it. A lot of people ask me to write it. I go, I really advise it. They really have to get me to my computer to sit down to write the press release. It's more work for my clients to even get me to write the press release. They'll tell you. I really think it's a waste of time. Now, if it's in really rare cases, if I'm launching something for a charity, I might just put it in. If I'm working with a huge brand with like multi-million-dollar budgets, I'll do it. Yes, it does help slightly with SEO, but now a lot of the like Google and what have you became aware of that, so it's still buried. It used to be like, okay, at least it will improve my client's SEO, but really it's not moving the dial. So I wouldn't advise to do and pay for a press release and think that that's going to move it for you. And a lot of people go, I'm going to do PR. And the first question they ask their publicist is, well, what about my press release? Are you writing my press release? And then the PR agency is like, of course, we wrote the press release. And then the client is like, oh yes, my PR agency is doing so much for me. They wrote my press release. And then silence, right? So I want to focus on the press release. And also, here's a detrimental effect. You write the press release, and then you send it out and annoy 2,000 people. Do they really care? No. Really, do you care, Jess, about a press release for 99% of people? Frankly, probably not.
So what does a press release contain? So just get a little bit more,
You could go
like clarity.
the press release is just so boring to me that Google it. And again, in my PR program, I'm going to break it down. I think that the best way and reason to write a press release is to clarify your vision. What do you envision, right? Like a press release starts with where you're writing it from, news, a quote from the CEO or CMO or business leader within the company, and what you're doing that's novel and different. Why is it important? You're launching a sock. Why does it matter?
So it's not your story. So if it was a document sharing your story, then it would be more interesting, or does it actually share the story?
Well, for a launch, if we did a press release for a launch, it would say, started this company to disrupt this, to do this, to make life easier. Here's a quote from the founder. This is why we're better than the competition.
You really don't like press releases.
You see what I'm saying, right? Like, how many people, like when I'm doing pitches, which I don't do myself anymore, but my company does pitches, I say I could attach a really broad press release that's not specific to the journalist. The journalist has 1,000 other things to do, and there are 1,000 other people to get back to you. Do you think they're really going to go, rah, rah, yay, press release? No, I want to be as specific as possible. I want to know who I'm talking to, and I want to give them information that matters to them, and then maybe attach a press release. And if you have time, here's a press release. Like, that's the reality of it. But I do think it helps entrepreneurs and business owners and creatives to really hone their vision, just like Bezos is. Speaking highly of Bezos for you one time. But just one time. It's the only good thing about Bezos.
We promised we would not get political.
No,
we would get like.
But yeah, but it's important to know how to do a press release. I think a lot of people could write press release themselves. I think a lot of people make a dumb mistake about writing a press release themselves, and it's so freaking boring. Your company may be exciting for you, but it's not always exciting, right?
Sometimes it's even better to just do a video about what the story is and why you're doing this, and like just putting that out.
I mean, I think that would annoy press. Like if you're talking.
So what's the right thing to do?
Again, like I'll send you the link. It's going to be, it's launching on Monday. So I'll be able to send you a link, and you could send your audience a program it's like 100 pages, but you know, I keep it really happy-go-lucky. I try to make it as accessible, but also not boring. You know, it's not your typical manual. And I'm going to give you some real case studies that will help. But yeah, well, I forget the question now.
That's all right. We were talking about, you know, how to get it out to the press, and I just noticed the time, and I still have not asked you the 2 questions that we always love to ask.
Okay.
In this interview. So just to make sure, for those who are tuning in who want access, Shannon is giving to our Hack Mankind community, and if you join her on the Restless Group Instagram, is it at the Restless Group?
It's not the.
Oh, it's at Restless Group.
It's just such a long name. It's Restless Group. Yeah, just Restless Group. Just DM. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, so a direct message, Shannon, and she will be able to send you that. And we will, by Monday or on Monday, whenever it's ready, put the link below and on the comments on the Facebook and
subscribe and then just get some info. Yeah.
Yes. Perfect. And so just to wrap up, Shannon, so I always like to ask this question on our interviews, because, you know, we are at a unique time. As Peter mentioned during the call, things are not the way they were a few months ago. And we've kind of had the chance to have kind of a sabbatical for a lot of us. Like you're at the beach house. I was there with you a couple weeks ago, and I was there for like over a month, I think, because I ran away from the city. In a way, it's like we're all having this pause button. We're all working from home. You know, a lot of us are still quarantined. What has been the one thing that you've seen as an opportunity for yourself during this time?
I mean, I think we get along because I'm programmed to really pivot into opportunity almost always. So for me personally, or for my industry, I mean,
I mean, one of the things we talked about, like you said, I'm changing the name of my company from Restless to Rest. I'm becoming a monk.
I'm actually not, but I want to do that. But you know, that's a real thing. I mean, in my industry, to give you an example, we started building projects 2 years in advance, because when you're working with the biggest brands in the world, that is really what it requires. So I came into the season thinking I was going to have to go to South by Southwest and Coachella and then Cannes and the Tribeca Film Festival and all these major things, right? And it takes so much energy. And I've been kind of going with it and in that tunnel that I didn't realize how tired I was and how much pressure that actually puts on me. So I'm really grateful that I got time to step back and go deeply creative. And now I'm launching a couple cool projects that came out of that, and really trying to deconstruct structures that don't make sense, right? Like, how do I democratize PR? How do I disrupt PR? How do I disrupt advertising? How do I meld the two together? Like, what's working in my world? What's not working? How are we going to reintegrate into events? Because they ultimately are very important to me. I don't want to only switch to digital. I think human experience is fundamental to our existence. So how are we going to be the leaders when things open up? So these are all the things that I'm thinking of. How could I help my community? How can I support my community when they open up? How could I use my contacts in press to help the people I care about? So I'm busy. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you're keeping busy. So if you had to name one thing that has been really like, yeah, this is one thing that I've seized that I wasn't doing before. Just one thing for yourself. It could be taking up knitting. I know you're not knitting, but what would that be? What's one thing that you've taken this as an opportunity to do for yourself?
Riding tigers, listening to lions sing songs, tap dancing in the water.
That was true. And manifesting dolphins. Guys, Shannon has the power to manifest dolphins.
I'll talk about this too. I mean, I actually just jumped in the ocean. My hair was still wet when I got on this call. And I think that, like, from an entrepreneurial perspective, starting my agency, I actually didn't think I was starting an agency. And I haven't had the opportunity to even build my own brand because I've been so busy building brands for other people with a really small team. And it's given me a space for breath to really realize, okay, where is the trajectory of my agency going to go and what's really important to me? But also, like, getting back in the body, getting connected to the why, being able to say no to the pressures. A lot of the times we're taking on projects because as an entrepreneur, right, there's this duality. How can I be insatiably creative? But then how do I be accountable to the people that, pay rent because of me? It's a really hard balance. And as an entrepreneur, it's really hard. But as a female entrepreneur, there's some other layers to that, right? The people pleasing that some women do and the pressure we put on themselves. So, and myself, I'll talk for myself. So I really trying to work on that and work on structure and creating boundaries and health and really focusing on my health, getting into meditation. It's crazy. Master Co. I'm going to drop Master Co. and really be mindful. It's a new thing. I was in a tunnel and Peter said, like, it's hard to get me to sit down.
The restless monk.
So maybe that's my new thing, the restless monk. Like, how do we live with health and passion? How do we live with certainty more? It's interesting because everyone's like, we're in a time of extreme uncertainty, which is true. But there's also a lot of mundanity. There's a lot of certainty right now as well. Well, I know today that I'm not going out tonight. I know today that I'm going to be in my pajamas. So how do we live in that and be okay with that? Working on that.
Thank you. That was really insightful. I'm grateful for you sharing that. And then my last question is, what do you see as an opportunity coming out of this? So just to frame it, here at Hack Mankind, we really want to confront fear and misinformation head on and create, more hope, opportunity, and clarity for people who are tuning in with us, giving them tools to really, be in that space, hope, opportunity, and clarity. And there's so much happening that we've seen that's so beautiful. Like in Manhattan, when we're in New York at 7 p.m., everybody comes out and like bangs the kitchenware, makes noise to thank for workers. homeless people have been swept out of the street and taken into shelters and homes. What are we going to do? Kick them all back out on the street when this is over? Are we going to start, ignoring each other again and not caring about health workers or whatever it is? So one of the things that I like to ask is, what do you see as an opportunity for Hack Mankind? And what would you like, the one thing, I know there's a lot, but one thing, if you had to pick one that you'd like to see coming out of this, what would you like to see happen?
Well, I told you I want to get political, so I'm not going to do
so
that.
Yeah, not political.
Well, mindfulness. Everything that you have in your life could collapse in a day. Maybe you could take the courage to do what you want to do, because you live in certainty and you work at a job you hate and you have a dream and you go, well, at least I have security, and then you get fired. You don't have security. You never have security. Okay. One. But two, I want to have a call out, because when we reopen, try to support your local businesses and your small businesses. The little guy on your block. A lot of these people are doing that because they were following their dream. You don't make a lot of money running a restaurant in New York City. So really support industry within your community. I think that would be great if I could give that as my call to action. I know a lot of people are ordering on Amazon and they're developing habits, and the marketing mind of me knows, right? When we get in a habit, it becomes trend. So be very mindful about how you consume, why you consume, and that'd be great.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Shannon. It's been such a pleasure having you on here. I always get a lot of value of spending time together. And it's the first time we were on a professional level. So I'm proud of ourselves in a way. Do we, maintain that a little?
DM me for dirt on Jessica, and I will send that privately. I'm joking. Yeah. Love you. Yeah.
I'm an open book, guys. Just make sure www.hackmankind.com. So you can get on the backstage area and ask all the questions. Thank you so much, Aziz, for tuning in. Darcy, we saw your messages. Thank you so much. Karen also has been on. And then all the wonderful Samor, Marvin, Clint, amazing Diana. And those are the few names that I managed to read on the Facebook group and also on the back end. Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure being here with you. As always, www.hackmankind.com. We will change our platform soon, so I do not know how long we will continue being live on Facebook. So make sure that you head on over to the website, and also at Restless Group, and send a message to Shannon if you want to get her 101 secrets to PR during this quarantine, during this COVID time. And she will give you some.
You'll see it around, Jess, because if nobody knows about the program, that means I'm bad at PR. So you'll see it around. And I'm about to jump in the ocean. It's freezing cold. I'm going to do it. You're
going to do it. You're going to do it. Let's do it. Thank you so much. Thank you, Christine, for your lovely heart comment. So thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you, Shannon. Any final words before we head over? Oh.
I was ready to go. I'm like, peace. No. Have a good one, guys. Happy weekend.
Thank you. Enjoy the beach. Love you.
Take it easy.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.